London, 1714. The streets heaved with anger as a man most Britons had never seen was crowned their king. George I, Elector of Hanover, German-speaking, distant, unfamiliar, arrived in a kingdom that did not want him. Pamphlets mocked his accent. Crowds rioted at the idea of a foreign monarch ruling their island. And yet he was presented as the natural heir, the inevitable successor, the simple next in line. But that story is a myth. George I's coronation was not destiny. It was a political construction, engineered through law, fear, and the desperate need to control the future. And that choice would reinvent the British monarchy forever. The Stuart Crisis, a dynasty without an heir. The crisis began not with George I, but with Queen Anne. Her reign was marked by triumph and tragedy, military victories abroad, but unbearable loss at home. Over the course of her life, Anne endured 17 pregnancies, miscarriages, stillbirths, children who lived only hours or days. Her only child to reach boyhood, Prince William, died at the age of 11. By 1714, Anne had no surviving heir, and the Tudor-Stuart line that had ruled for more than a century stood on the brink of extinction. The political vacuum her impending death created was terrifying. England had endured civil war, religious upheaval, and revolution in the previous century. The thought of another succession crisis threatened to plunge the kingdom back into chaos. And here was the problem. There were dozens of blood relatives with a closer hereditary claim than any Hanoverian. The Stuart family tree was vast, but almost all of them were Catholic. At the center stood James Francis Edward Stuart, known to his supporters as James III and to his enemies as the Old Pretender. He was the son of the deposed King James II, and by strict hereditary principle, the rightful heir to the English throne. His claim was stronger than anyone else's. But England had rejected Catholic monarchy during the Glorious Revolution of 1688 and associated it with tyranny, absolutism, and foreign influence. Thus emerged the core conflict: bloodline versus religious identity. The rightful heir could not be allowed to reign. The country's stability depended on excluding him. And so Parliament did something unprecedented. It stepped in, not to choose the rightful heir, but to choose the safe one. The Act of Settlement, engineering a Protestant future. In 1701, Parliament passed a law that reshaped the monarchy, the Act of Settlement. It was not a defensive measure. It was a blueprint, a deliberate engineering of the future. The Act rewrote centuries of hereditary practice in a single stroke. Its key clause was stark. No Catholic or anyone married to a Catholic could inherit the throne. With that one line, Parliament bypassed dozens of closer relatives and erased the hereditary claims of entire branches of the royal family. Instead, they reached across Europe to name a distant Protestant cousin, Electress Sophia of Hanover, granddaughter of King James I. She was chosen not for proximity, but for acceptability. As Edmund Burke would later write, the Protestant succession was the cornerstone of England's political security. It was a political judgment dressed in the language of inevitability. Sophia herself never lived to claim the throne. She died only weeks before Queen Anne. And so the newly engineered succession passed to her son, George Ludwig, Elector of Hanover, a man with little interest in Britain and even less connection to its people. Thomas Babington Macaulay captured the contradiction perfectly. By blood, the claim of the pretender was nearer. By policy, it was fatal. The law had secured the legal route, but the people were not convinced. George I, the reluctant king, and the Jacobite backlash. George I arrived in Britain not as a savior, but as a compromise. He was a 60-year-old German prince who barely spoke English and seemed bewildered by the kingdom he was meant to rule. His court brought with them German advisors and customs, fueling accusations that England was now under foreign management. The backlash was immediate. Pamphlets ridiculed the king's speech and mannerisms. London erupted in riots. Jacobite sympathizers declared that the true king, James Stuart, had been cheated by Parliament's manipulation of the law. In 1715, this anger exploded into rebellion. The Jacobite rising attempted to overturn the Hanoverian settlement by force. Though it ultimately failed, it proved that the new dynasty's hold on the crown was anything but secure. Yet Parliament stood firmly behind George I. He represented the one thing they valued above lineage: Protestant stability. In a world still haunted by memories of Catholic Stuart rule, stability mattered more than tradition. Historian Linda Colley later wrote, "The Hanoverian settlement helped create a Protestant British identity out of political necessity. It forged a national identity, not from royal legitimacy, but from religious cohesion and shared fear of instability." A brief counterfactual hovers over this moment. What if James III, charismatic, Catholic, and closer by blood, had taken the throne? Britain might have faced renewed conflict with Parliament, deeper ties to Catholic Europe, or even a reversal of the Glorious Revolution. In the end, the Hanoverians were not chosen for who they were, but for who they were not. The lasting legacy, from reluctant king to modern monarchy. George I never embraced Britain, and in an irony of history, this distance transformed the monarchy itself. Because the king was unfamiliar with British politics and uninterested in governing directly, real power began to shift toward his ministers. This was the birth of cabinet government. This was the rise of the prime minister, most notably under Robert Walpole, who effectively governed while George concerned himself with Hanover. From this unintended consequence emerged the modern constitutional monarchy, a system in which the sovereign reigns, but does not rule. The Hanoverian era also created a personal union with Hanover that lasted until 1837, shaping foreign policy and royal identity for over a century. The Jacobite threat, meanwhile, lingered for decades, forging a British identity rooted in Protestant unity and anti-Stuart sentiment. And the legacy persists. Modern succession laws still reflect the Protestant foundation laid in 1701. The monarchy today exists not because of unbroken hereditary principle, but because of deliberate political design. The myth versus reality becomes clear. Britain did not inherit the Hanoverians. Britain constructed them. The Hanoverian succession was not fate. It was a calculated political maneuver born from fear and uncertainty. Yet from that decision emerged the monarchy we recognize today. If you want to explore the hidden forces that shaped royal power, subscribe for our next deep dive into the myths behind the crown.